Well, Israel started a war with Iran last week and then cried about the terror and injustice as Iran struck back. Iran is now worse than Hitler, as they are apparently just weeks away from obtaining nuclear weapons. Strangely, they have been on the verge of having nukes for several decades now, according to Israeli and American neocons. But Bibi finally has his war. American Jewish Zionists are screeching incoherent doublespeak about how it is in America's interest to join the war, and anyone who says otherwise is a Jew-hating Nazi. If you speak up loudly enough, you too can get a fun nickname, like the newly dubbed Chatsworth Catarlson. I mean, heaven forbid that Americans be concerned with America and disapprove of another Middle Eastern war on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein's employer. So I had been planning to come back over to my channel after a month covering for Candace's maternity leave and talk about fun, light conspiracies, like what's in your grocery store. But then the deep state just had to go and start World War III. So today, for my first episode back on my own channel, we're going to break down everything about the Israel-Iran war that the news isn't telling you, and that mainstream conservative Twitter analysts would rather ignore, and that Jewish Zionists will just screech anti-Semitism at you rather than form a coherent argument against. It's finally time to cancel Ian Carroll.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
So, last Thursday, Israel launched preemptive strikes on Iran, meaning they started a war. They targeted their nuclear facilities, their military capabilities, and also every top official that was one day away from making progress in peace talks and diplomatic nuclear negotiations with the United States. Israeli and American deep state media and pundits flooded the airwaves with fear propaganda about how Iran was just months or even weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong headline. That one's from 1995, when I was just 3 years old. See, here we go. Iran is 1 or 2 weeks away from producing material for a nuclear weapon. Right, but this was a year ago, and Iran is still not producing the 90% enriched uranium that Blinken was talking about. But regardless, the current narrative is that after years of warnings and intelligence gathering, the Iranian regime has reached a point of no return in its quest for nuclear bombs. Now, it's important to note that this is based off of intelligence gathered by Israel, which has never led us astray before. Certainly never has misleading and outright false Israeli intelligence been used to drag the US into a disastrous Middle Eastern war before. I mean, this is, of course, despite the fact that just this year, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence and the head of the US intelligence community, clearly stated in her annual threat assessment that Iran is, quote, not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khomeini has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. But that doesn't stop Israeli conspiracy theorists from stating that the Iranian regime has been advancing a secret plan involving nuclear scientists working secretly to develop nuclear weapons. And I mean, Israel would know. They are virtually neighbors with Iran and have one of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies operating today, closely monitoring the situation, which is why Bibi gave this address to Congress about the matter.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons.
Sorry, my bad. Wrong clip. That was Netanyahu telling us there was no question whatsoever that Saddam Hussein was developing nuclear weapons back in 2003. Obviously, that turned out to be an abject lie. I'm sure Bibi didn't know it was a lie, though. I'm sure he would never lie to get the U.S. into a Middle Eastern war to benefit Israeli interests, right? But anyways, here he is lecturing his AIPAC purchased Congress about Iran's nuclear threat.
I'm deeply humbled by the opportunity to speak for a third time before the most important legislative body in the world, the U.S. Congress. I deeply regret that some perceive my being here as political. That was never my intention. I've come here today because as Prime Minister of Israel, I feel a profound obligation to speak to you about an issue that could well threaten the survival of my country and the future of my people. While the final deal has not yet been signed, certain elements of any potential deal are now a matter of public record. You can Google it. This deal has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade. A deal that's supposed to prevent nuclear proliferation would instead spark a nuclear arms race in the most dangerous part of the planet.
You get the idea. And if you didn't know, that was actually 10 years ago, in 2015. You see, Zionist warhawks have been plotting the destruction of Iran since they published the Clean Break Report, all the way back in 1996, detailing how in order to pursue peace in the Middle East, Israel just needed to go do a little bit of war with Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Well, Iran is the last one on the list, and now, 30 years, 3 government corruption trials, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives, and tens of billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars later, Benjamin Netanyahu is finally putting the finishing touches on the plan to secure the realm. But is Iran actually as close to a nuclear weapon as Netanyahu claims? Because when you actually look behind the salacious headlines and do a little research, it's not so clear. And just to be clear, I am no expert. I've never been to Iran. I'm not paid to have an opinion by the US or the Israeli government. I'm not educated in deep state think tanks and never went to the island to diddle kids. So I'm really not that qualified to speak on the topic. But I figured I'd do a little reading and just see what my feeble American mind could come up with. Because Netanyahu is claiming that he had to act in order to preempt a secret Iranian program and that Tehran already had the capacity to build 9 nuclear bombs. But is it possible that he was preempting a diplomatic agreement between the US and Iran? Or even just to further progress the war, to keep the spotlight off of his looming corruption trial and likely imprisonment the moment Israel is no longer at war? Because if you haven't seen the episode I did on Candace's channel about the BB files and his corruption trial, it's a must watch for everyone all around the world. I'll drop the link into the description below. You can check it out later. But aside from his corruption trial, the claim that Iran is about to have a nuclear weapon runs contrary to not only Tulsi Gabbard and the US intel community's assessment, but also that of the UN and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, that's not to say that there's no reason for concern. Iran had stepped away from the negotiation table since Trump backed out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. In recent years, more radical figures in Iran's government have been more emboldened to call for a nuclear-armed Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency released a report this week that said Iran has recently been failing to cooperate with complete inspections of its civilian nuclear program. It did not say that Iran was on the verge of a nuclear weapon. In fact, it concluded that it had, quote, no credible indications of an ongoing undeclared structured nuclear program. The statistic that has many the most concerned is Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium. This is essentially a deterrent strategy on Iran's behalf. Obviously, it didn't turn out so well, but you get the point. To simplify it, is that for civilian nuclear energy, you only need about 3% enriched uranium. Very little. To build a nuclear bomb, however, you need about 90% enriched uranium, super pure. And so 90% enriched uranium is highly regulated and monitored. It's an extremely expensive and laborious process to create it. And so Iran has been stockpiling 60% enriched uranium for quite some time as a sort of threat that they could build a bomb if they feel threatened or have reason to. At least that's the idea. What Israel is claiming is that they have some secret program where they are finishing the enrichment and building a bomb. What the IAEA report says is that they see no evidence of that happening. And if Iran were to develop a nuclear weapon, that would be shitty. Iran is certainly not the kind of kid on the playground that you want walking around with the big red button. But it's important to put this in context. The playground that Iran is on is the Middle East. They pose absolutely zero threat to America. A nuclear bomb requires a delivery method. You have to get it to your target before you can blow it up, obviously. With a nuke, that's usually a ballistic missile fired from the ground or a plane or a submarine. Iran's current range is limited to its neighborhood. China, Russia, Egypt, or India all might have some concern about Iranian nuclear capability. But beyond that, there is virtually no threat, at least not to America. One could argue that they would try to smuggle a suitcase nuke into the United States, but I would argue that I'm more concerned about another Middle Eastern country doing that. So, anyways, this map is critical to understanding calls for the U.S. to go to war in Iran. And all the fear-mongering about Iranian nuclear weapons right now, all the first Tel Aviv and then New York, oh no, it's propaganda. Iran not only poses no threat to the United States, but it is also highly incentivized not to poke the United States and induce us into entering this war. If there's a terrorist attack on American soil that gets used to justify war in Iran, you can bet the farm that it's not Iran behind it. Iran wants to fight Israel on its own. They aren't dumb. Israel is the country that wants America to enter the war that they started. So, it's a good thing that Israel has never taken part in any false flag attacks on American soil before. Otherwise, I would be a little worried that they might do that again. Because you see, Iran did go through a phase where it seemed to be working directly towards nuclear weapons, starting back in 1997. But by late 2003, after seeing what we had just done to Saddam for not even having nukes, they decided that they probably didn't want to get caught on the other end of that if they actually did have nukes. So they shut the program down, deactivated the facilities, and shipped all the material to storage. Israel was, of course, sure to warn us that Iran was just 5 years away from a bomb at the time, a bomb which now, 30 years later, has yet to materialize. Lately, this image documenting all of Netanyahu's alleged claims about Iran's imminent nuclear bomb has been floating around Twitter. It's nothing new. And, as you should, you may be wondering, how can we just trust some random Twitter graphic with wild claims like this? You're correct. You should not trust random Twitter graphics. You should do your own research and verify. So I'll get you started with the first one. In 1992, Benjamin Netanyahu published a column in Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth, which, also, side note, just so happens to be the same newspaper that he stands accused of trading political favors with in exchange for positive media coverage, an offense that could and should land him in prison when he's convicted. But anyways, the headline in Ynet News is a bit confusing because Netanyahu published this column in 1992 and then went on to repeat his claims in 1993 that Iran would have the bomb by 1999, which is now 26 years ago. He's repeated that claim again and again ever since, whenever it's convenient. Iran is an extremist genocidal regime that must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons at any cost. And, yeah, sure. But the absolute ass-backwards tragic irony of this whole situation is that Israel, currently run by Jewish supremacists and terrorists like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, the nation that is conducting a literal genocide right now on live TV and did this to civilians trapped in Gaza, they are the ones that have a secret stolen nuclear arsenal. Israel has an extensive nuclear weapons program that they refuse to acknowledge, that they stole from the United States, and they're the ones screeching about genocidal regimes having secret nuclear programs. So here's a clip making the rounds right now to help give you a sense for the Israeli position on the matter.
How many nuclear weapons does Iran have as of today?
Right now, I hope none.
Okay, how many does Israel have?
No idea.
No idea? You were in the government. They don't tell you that stuff.
No idea.
Who do they tell?
No idea.
Do you recognize the hypocrisy of Israel having a secret illicit nuclear weapons program that it won't open up its doors to and won't talk about, and then lecturing everyone else in the region about nuclear weapons?
Absolutely not. You know why?
You talked about hypocrisy. If an Iranian guest came on my show and I asked him about Iran's nuclear program, he said, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. Would you be okay with that? You'd be outraged.
Of course.
And yet you sit here as a former minister of the Israeli government saying, oh, I don't know, I never talked about nukes with anyone.
Because there was like 16 United Nations Security Council resolutions against Iran.
And there is against Israel. And there is against Israel as well.
About
your nuclear program.
No.
Yes, there is. UN Resolution 487. Let me read it to you. The UN Security Council in 1981 says, calls upon Israel urgently to place its nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the IAEA. Why haven't you done that?
Because
that smile really says it all. As you can see, Israeli spokesmen don't really like to talk about it because there's just no way to defend it, even if they wanted to. But they're not allowed to because Israel's nuclear program officially doesn't exist. So here's an even more awkward clip to help fill out the point.
Why should the world tolerate you having nuclear weapons and not, say, Iran?
First, again, we never admitted to have such a weapons. But the very comparison is, I must say, it's very insulting, and I tell you why. We suffered one Holocaust. We listened to our neighbors.
Is it because of the Holocaust
Right
that you
to the
should be
Holocaust.
allowed to have nuclear weapons?
You know what? This interview was finished now. Your
Shut it
attitude is so
down.
hostile.
Wait,
And your
hey,
questions
just
are-
shut it down. Shut it down. Just shut it right down. That was so disrespectful for him to even make the comparison, to even ask the question. He like blood libeled him right there on the spot. Yeah, you heard that correctly. You are apparently a blood libeling anti-Semite if you want to talk about Israel's nuclear program, which the whole world knows about. But Israel, like a literal 5-year-old, just says, "No, I don't have any nukes in there." Like, okay, then let's open it up and see, just to make sure. But no, that's totally not cool with them. That's actually super offensive to even suggest. But it turns out that John F. Kennedy was awfully anti-Semitic because he persistently pushed for inspections of their then budding nuclear program in the Negev desert just outside of Dimona. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages of documentation of the back and forth, the inspections, and the tricks pulled by the Israeli government to obscure the nature of their program from Kennedy. This even included setting up a fake control room and disguising parts of the facility used to process plutonium ahead of one of the inspections. For 3 years, Israel evaded and undermined Kennedy's attempts to curtail their nuclear ambitions, and when he wouldn't relent, conveniently, he just happened to be assassinated by a lone nut gunman that had nothing to do with the CIA and had magic bullets in his gun capable of changing direction mid-flight. It was all rather good timing for Israel. Especially because Kennedy's replacement was Lyndon Johnson, who was one of the most pro-Israel presidents in U.S. history. Haaretz famously reported in 2018 that Israel has had no better friend. Of course, that was before documentation came out that seemed to implicate LBJ in the Kennedy assassination plot, but we all know it wasn't just him. As with everything else these days, it was probably Qatar that masterminded the whole thing, and just you wait and see, the proof will come out. That was a joke, obviously. And so, Israel's nuclear program went on in secret. These days, most experts estimate that they have between 50 and 400 nuclear warheads. Israel has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that other nations like Iran have signed. They do not submit to inspections by the IAEA like Iran did until recently. They are, for some reason, exempt from all that. And if you're exempt from all the rules, why stop? So they didn't. In 2021, the Associated Press published this report examining new satellite imagery that clearly showed Israel was up to something. They reported that it appeared to be the Dimona nuclear facility's largest renovation project in decades. AP speculates that it may have to do with replacing aging capabilities of the plant, but who knows? After all, ever since the Holocaust, the Jewish state has the God-given right to nuclear weapons, and don't ask any questions. Israel maintains that its nuclear program does not officially produce weapons, but in 1998, when Prime Minister Shimon Peres, who used to lead the Israeli nuclear program, was asked about the purpose of their nuclear program, he said, quote, "We have built a nuclear option not in order to have a Hiroshima, but to have an Oslo," referring to the Oslo Peace Accords, as in, we have a nuclear program that is capable of producing weapons if we needed them as a nuclear deterrent. Like, exactly what Iran was doing today. So, that way we could have an Oslo Peace Accords because of our nuclear deterrent, which is absurd in light of their current stance on Iran's nuclear program. But it is doubly comical when you remember that Israeli extremists assassinated their own prime minister, Yitzhak Rabin, for the sin of signing a peace deal with the Palestinians. They also assassinated Yasser Arafat for his part in it all, or at least someone did. Who knows? Itamar Ben-Gvir, the current Israeli defense minister under Netanyahu, openly spoke about his support of the Jewish terrorists that killed Rabin at the time. We covered that in my episode on Candace about the Bibi files. So, Israel's claims that Iran is about to have a nuke are a tired old piece of propaganda, recycled for the last 30 years. Their fears of a genocidal regime having a secret nuclear program is as much a confession as an accusation. And their stated goal in Iran seems to be moving towards an end goal of just regime change. Netanyahu published this speech after his preemptive strike on Iran over the weekend.
Tonight I wish to speak to you, the proud people of Iran. We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation rising lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel. And as we achieve our objectives, we're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom. In the past 24 hours, we've taken out top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility,
and all the dudes that were involved in peace talks, coincidentally,
and a large portion of its ballistic missile arsenal. More is on the way. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them. The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker. This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. Woman, life, freedom. Zan, Zandegi, Azadi. As I said yesterday and many times before, Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, like, his fight is not with them, and they can tell because he's bombing them. So note how he claims he is addressing the Iranian people, but he's speaking in English. Yeah, you can always tell when Netanyahu is spouting propaganda because he speaks in English, because he is speaking to you, the American people, for our benefit. He's trying to portray himself as liberating the people of Iran from their oppressive regime. And certainly, the government in Iran is horribly oppressive and in every way worthy of condemnation. But let's remember how Iran wound up with that regime in the first place, shall we? Because, you see, if you're not familiar, this all started back in the founding years of the CIA and Israel in 1953, when the CIA backed a coup with millions of taxpayer dollars that overthrew the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. They didn't overthrow him because he was building nukes or killing Jews or anything crazy like that. They overthrew him because he was nationalizing Iran's oil and stopping Shell Oil from exploiting the Iranian people and their resources for Western benefit. So for the crime of putting his own people's interests first, he was overthrown and eventually put in prison. The Western deep state installed their puppet, the Shah of Iran, who ruled with a dictatorial hand that grew more and more oppressive over the years until it eventually led to the Iranian Revolution. That revolutionary movement built throughout the Shah's rule until it reached a fever pitch in 1978, with Ayatollah Khomeini emerging as the figurehead of it. The revolutionary spirit of the Iranian people was met with massacres of civilians by the Shah's government. The people of Iran organized a massive striking movement that culminated in a nationwide general strike and crippled the country. And all throughout, the U.S. government funded the brutally oppressive puppet government that they had installed, as is our habit all around the world, ever since America rose to global dominance in the early 20th century. Maybe having something to do with the Federal Reserve, but I digress. So, millions of Iranians took to the street in protest in 1978, and eventually they won out. The Shah of Iran was ousted from the government and forced to flee the country and go into hiding. Iran eventually went through a series of political power struggles before settling into its current state as the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. It has been a bastion of some of the most extreme aspects of Islam ever since. That is how we got to where we're at today. It was because of Western regime change that Iran hates the West. It was because of Israeli and American oppression that they chant death to America and death to Israel. Does that mean that I sympathize with them and think that they're in the right? No, of course not. But should knowing that color your perspective on Western action against Iran today and what the best course of action is right now? Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned at the start of this episode, Israel's strike against Iran came the day before Trump had talks scheduled with Iran that promised to be a genuine step towards peace and de-escalation. At least, That's what they appeared to promise. Now, Trump is even going along with the narrative that it was all a ruse to get Iran to lower their guard, which is such a short-sighted undermining of our future diplomatic action. It is absurd. Like, do you think that the next guy will want to sit down for peace talks with America? Do you think that when China is invited to the table for peace talks or North Korea is threatening nuclear strikes, do you think that they're going to feel like they can trust us to negotiate in good faith when they watched what happened to Iran when they were foolish enough to take America at her word? It's damn near treason for Trump to talk like that. Not only was he elected on the promise of peace, the promise that he would not take America to any more foreign wars, but then he goes out and not only gets us into the exact war we wanted to stay out of, he does so in the most slimy, short-sighted way imaginable. The blowback from this decision will play out for many decades to come, and no one today can predict how bad the consequences might be for us and for the whole world. And so, Bibi thinks that he's going to perform regime change in Iran. He thinks that his floppy-eared ass is going to inspire Iranians to take up arms and overthrow their government as he rains destruction down on their heads. But the BBC points out that even if those in Iran that would overthrow the regime took action, and certainly there are plenty of people in Iran that hate the regime, but those with the most power by a wide margin are hardliners. Some of them are even more extreme than the leadership that was just wiped out. Based on Bibi's words about revolution, I can only assume that Mossad and probably the CIA are already hard at work fomenting such a revolution, and so they must have a candidate in mind to step in and save the day. Some point to former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the former Shah, as their likely candidate. He lives in exile and has been actively trying to gain support for his cause. He also was visiting Israel recently. But do you really think that Iran is going to want the son of the dude that they overthrew for being a Western puppet that was a brutal dictator murdering and imprisoning civilians? Do you think that they're going to want him to lead their new revolution? Yeah, I don't think so. So it's important to remember, as Israel is busy kicking off World War III over in the Middle East, there is still an elephant in the room. And his name is Jeffrey Epstein. And he clearly worked for Israeli intelligence, gathering compromising blackmail on powerful US and European politicians, corporate executives, and celebrities. After all, Alex Acosta was told that he worked for intelligence and to leave him alone. And by now, I've heard some pretty retarded takes, mostly all from Jewish Zionists trying to distract from the obvious, like he worked for Saudi Arabia, or Qatar, or MI6, or the CIA. Thinking a whole network of Jewish billionaires were working for Qatar is comical on absolutely every level. And it's a clear indicator that you're not to be taken seriously about anything. And if you think that a bunch of Jewish billionaires were working for the CIA and not for Israel, well, then you only need scroll through Jewish billionaire Twitter feeds today, like Bill Ackman's, for example, to see where their loyalties always seem to fall. To Israel first and to America second. But if you wanted more evidence, you might notice that Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel and ex-head of Israeli military intelligence, visited Epstein more than 30 times in the course of 4 years, often at regularly scheduled monthly intervals, sneaking in and out of Epstein's residences. And surely, you could hypothesize that Ehud liked to diddle kids and was being blackmailed. But is that really why you think that the head of Israeli military intelligence was meeting with Epstein? Like, really? Because Epstein was bankrolled by Leslie Wexner, one of the richest and most prominent Jewish Zionists in the world. And not only was Epstein using Wexner's Victoria's Secret to mask his recruitment operations, but we learned last year that Wexner's other fashion brand, Abercrombie & Fitch, was also involved in trafficking operations of male models. I did a whole report on it in my last week on Candace. Wexner was also a founding member of the Mega Group, which was a secretive organization of Jewish Zionist billionaires like Wexner and the Lauders, the Bronfmans, and other prominent, powerful Jews like Steven Spielberg and Lawrence Tisch. Not a lot is known about the Mega Group, but all evidence indicates that it was some sort of front, I guess, for clandestine Israeli espionage activity masked as Jewish philanthropy. And then there was Monica Lewinsky, the Jewish woman who entrapped the president of the United States in a blowjob scandal that nearly toppled his presidency. It's pretty weird timing that just so happened to be at the height of Epstein's sexual blackmail operations, right as Bill was moving towards those Oslo peace accords. And I know, holy smokes, slow down with the Jewish conspiracy theories, Ian. You're some sort of anti-Semite? I mean, come on, you can't just assume that Monica Lewinsky was part of the Epstein network just because she's Jewish. Correct. You cannot assume that. And even though Bill Clinton was one of Epstein's primary targets, and Epstein visited the White House 17 times that we know of during the Clinton presidency, you still can't assume that the two are related. But then, when you dig into it a bit, you learn that somehow Netanyahu wound up with recordings of Bill Clinton and Monica having phone sex. How the hell did Bibi get them? It was reported in the Times of Israel that Mossad had collected some 30 hours worth of phone sex conversations. It was even alleged that Netanyahu tried to blackmail Clinton with those tapes in exchange for the release of Jonathan Pollard. If you don't know about Jonathan Pollard, well, let's just say that Israel has a long history of infiltrating and conducting espionage against the American government. So, who knows, maybe Monica Lewinsky had nothing to do with Epstein, but it sure is weird that while this apparent Israeli sexual blackmail operation has its claws in Clinton, and he 17 times in the White House, and he's doing stuff that they don't like peace, he just so happens to have a sex tape scandal that's wildly embarrassing. Almost like someone was firing a warning shot at him. I mean, imagine what else they might have had on tape. Bill? But of course, it's not just Clinton. Epstein's known, alleged, and suspected targets are many of the most powerful men in America and Europe. Government, finance, culture, you name it. And basically his entire network was composed of Jewish Zionists, Israelis, and even Israeli spies. Ari Ben-Menashe, an actual ex-Israeli intelligence officer, even directly claimed on record that Epstein worked for Israeli intelligence. Robert Maxwell, a known Mossad operative by all indications, recruited and trained Epstein. Ronald Lauder, Leslie Wexner, Glenn Dubin were all tied to him through close personal and financial relationships. Ehud Barak himself checked in on Epstein monthly, a lot like a handler would. And to this day, not only is Epstein's blackmail still in play, but so are his financial movements. Whitney Webb has long reported on Epstein's ties to Peter Thiel and the technocratic surveillance industry through companies like Carbine 911 and Palantir, and it was recently reported by even the New York Times that in 2015 and 2016, Jeffrey Epstein invested $40 million with a venture capital firm founded by Peter Thiel. Now, seeing as Peter Thiel currently has his hand just about as far up the ass of the Trump administration as is humanly possible, that feels particularly relevant today. Although it remains to be seen exactly whose ass he's the furthest up, just about every single tech CEO in America today had some level of association with him, both before and after his first arrest and conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor in Florida. Then, of course, there's Donald Trump. And listen, I don't know if Trump ever abused any kids with or without Epstein. I don't know if all the allegations against him are as retarded and underthought as that one old lady he allegedly groped in the New York fitting room or not. But I do know that Trump bought the Plaza Hotel, even financially overextended himself at the time to do it, that hotel, he surely had been told by his mentor Roy Cohn, was the hub of mob blackmail in the 40s and 50s when the mob and the blackmailed FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, were throwing cross-dressing gay sex orgies in the Blue Suite there. All of it was wired up with secret cameras recording reams of compromat on powerful political and social elites of the day. And I also know that Trump bought Adnan Khashoggi's boat and renamed it the Trump Princess. And that boat was notorious for being wired up with secret cameras used by Khashoggi to acquire blackmail on powerful people who he plied with liquor, drugs, whatever it was, boys and girls, you name it. If you ask me, Trump looks more like a dude who collected blackmail than a dude who was blackmailed. But that's speculation, no proof, and it's proof we'll likely never get. When I voted for Trump, I chose to look past those questions in hopes that Trump would keep us out of war in the Middle East, close our borders, and maybe deal with some of the financial and social turmoil here at home. Even just a small slice of making America less fucked up again would have been better than the alternative in my mind. Instead, Now, Trump seems to be every bit as much in on the deep staters' plot to enslave us all with digital surveillance and conquer the world for Israel as the next stooge. I mean, Trump really did have everything teed up for a home run, for the most historic American presidency in a century. He could have cemented his name next to like JFK and Lincoln and Washington, all deeply flawed men, yes, but despite the whitewash history, remembered for their greatness, for what they did for America. Trump was this close, like this close. All he needed to do was prosecute any one or two or a few of Jeffrey Epstein's known associates for their crimes, close the border, and kick out the illegal immigrants, and maybe not start any new wars. It turns out that MAGA was really MAGA all along. But on the bright side, every day, the veil of Israeli Hasbara disintegrates more and more. Every day, more people wake up to just how obvious and careless the Israeli propaganda campaign that has ruled the West for decades has become. For example, last year, Thomas Massie, who I'm told works for China, told Chatsworth Carlson about how everyone in Congress has an AIPAC handler.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
That's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
And now, Israel's unregistered foreign bribery committee is out here posting propaganda so retarded that you'd have to be Mitch McConnell to believe it. Quote, mass murder of civilians is Iran's strategy. Preventing this vicious regime from having a nuclear weapon is a necessity for Israel and the world. And we've got Israelis complaining about how men and women and children have to spend the whole night in tiny bomb shelters. He literally says, quote, no one deserves to live like this. Bitch, look at Gaza. Look at it. I'm sorry. Mass murder of civilians is Iran's strategy? Then what the fuck do you call this? Oh, and by the way, these men, women, and children, they didn't have bomb shelters to hide in, Yuri. They died. They watched their families and their friends die. They watched their home be reduced to a wasteland. They had nowhere to go. They didn't even have food or water for most of it because your government thought it wasn't enough to bomb the entire place to rubble, so you also restricted food and water from entering, causing untold more to starve to death. You evil, whiny pieces of shit. I'm trying very hard to maintain empathy for Israeli civilians caught in the crossfire of this war. But oh boy, is it hard after we have spent the last 2 years watching you all treat genocide like a spectator sport to be cheered for. So Maya, just a daily reminder, if you start a war, maybe don't complain when you wind up in a bomb shelter. And speaking of Iran's horrific strategy of targeting civilians, yeah, like they probably don't give too many shits what they hit. They're probably just hitting civilian infrastructure with whatever missiles are making it through your multi-billion-dollar Iron Dome that we all paid for. But it sure as hell would be a lot easier for them to not hit civilian targets if you weren't building your military infrastructure underneath densely populated civilian neighborhoods in the heart of Tel Aviv. This is a true story. The nation that just spent the last 2 years screeching about how Hamas uses human shields, oh my gosh, they're so barbaric, we have to bomb women and children because Hamas made us, oy vey. That nation is using human shields. They have been using human shields all along. On October 7th, they used human sacrifice to justify going to war in Gaza, as it came out later that Israeli intelligence knew about the attack in advance and pulled troops away from the border, then took many hours to mount any response to the attack. Can't imagine why. But Zionist Hasbro 101 is that you don't have to have a rational argument. You don't need to have any argument at all. Just say whatever you need to at that time to elicit maximum emotional response in support of Israel and against their enemy. Doesn't matter if it's in direct contradiction to the truth. Doesn't matter if it's the literal opposite of what you said yesterday. Doesn't matter if you have some other dude's dinger all the way up your asshole. Misfit Patriot is just so appalled that you would ever pray that innocent children die. Oh, the horror. At least propagandists like Konstantin Kisin are sophisticated in their deception. After all, you'd have to be retarded to want Iran to have nuclear weapons, right? Like, almost as retarded as someone that didn't realize that Israel has lied to us about Iran's nuclear program for 30 years. And the last time we went to war with someone Bibi told us was certainly about to have nukes, it didn't pan out so well. Konstantin Kisin is smug and dismissive in the exact way that someone is when they think you're too stupid to realize that that cake ain't baked all the way. Owen Schroyer put it quite plainly. The Zionist tactic is always logical fallacy. Right now, their favorite one is setting up false dichotomies to try to assert a duality that is absolutely absurd. Like, oh, you don't want to go to war for Israel? Well, then you must support Iran. No. So you want Iran to have a nuke then? No, I do not. So you don't believe Israel has a right to self-defense? Bitch, Israel struck Iran by surprise in the middle of the night, the day before they were going to engage in peace talks and de-escalation. That's like Pearl Harbor. That's like the Japanese rolling up on us during Pearl Harbor. Except in some ways, it's even more shiesty because at least Japan's allies weren't pretending to engage in peace discussions with us right before they did it. But just like Pearl Harbor, we are about to be dragged into this war. The deep state is just waiting for the pretext to do it. They are busy manufacturing consent because right now, they don't have it. Over the weekend, Charlie Kirk put out a poll because he needed to know if his audience would go along with the war propaganda that his buddies all want him to post. Should the U.S. get involved in Israel's war against Iran? Well, almost 500,000 votes among one of the most mainstream conservative audiences that you could possibly find, 90% said no. 90%! That is a white pill if I have ever swallowed one. Americans are waking up to what's going on out here, and they're over it. Because people are rightly wondering why we give billions of dollars of aid to Israel every year. I mean, even before they went to war with all their neighbors, because Detroit and Maui and East Palestine, Ohio, and Malibu are all left with nothing. No aid for the hurricane victims of Helene or Katrina. No money to fix homelessness here, or to get the poison out of our food, or to get cheaper health care here. But in Israel, they've got free health care. We're funding that. Here, we're passing speech laws to stop people from making Jew jokes and speaking up against a genocide on behalf of a foreign nation. Over there, they've got Telegram channels celebrating the rape and murder of Palestinians just out in the open. You can go look at them. And the American people are finally waking up to it. We're over it. But perhaps the one good thing to come of this whole war in Iran situation is we finally got the Epstein list. Yes, that's right. David Gornowski finally figured it out. He found it. The Epstein list is right there on Twitter for all to see. And it's all of our cucked, corrupted, piece of shit politicians all out here slobbering over the opportunity to lick Israel's boots while they drag us dangerously close to World War III. But don't worry. None of these guys are going to have to fight or die for the cause. Their kids aren't going to get sent. They'll actually make money. More than just what Israel paid them to post this trash, too. They're going to make money on their defense contractor stocks. They'll make money on their golden parachutes when they retire to the boards of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and ExxonMobil. And they'll make money from kickbacks and speaker fees for being good little goys and selling out their country to that one asshole nation that is, for some reason, it's illegal to criticize or boycott in America. But Israel obviously does not control America. I mean, they don't actually control anything, in fact. How could you even say that? Oh my goodness. Are you anti-Semitic? Are you a Jew hater? How could you even say such a thing? See, this is America, and our politicians are happy to hate on migrants waving Mexican flags because this is America. Except half of these beavers have Israeli flags up in their offices in Congress, in our American halls of Congress. But you're the conspiracy theorist for asking any questions. I mean, hell, since we're all conspiracy theorists by now, we might as well just jump to the chase. What's really going on? Who's really in charge out here, and what's the big plan? Well, amidst all the chaos, Bilderberg 2025 has begun in Stockholm. Bilderberg, if you're not familiar, is a very much real, totally not sinister cabal of all the world's most wealthy and powerful elites that meet once a year to discuss how to control the world. No joke, that's sort of the spooky way to describe what they actually do. And the Bilderbergers of the world take the long view, the big picture. So what's the big picture in the Middle East? What's the big picture for the West wanting to overthrow Iran? Well, it all comes back to the banks and the global reserve currency. Because for the last decade or so, China has been building out its Belt and Road Initiative, a serious challenger to Western geopolitical dominance. Get everyone trading with China as their primary trading partner, get oil to start trading in yuan, pretty soon they'll be in a position to take global reserve currency status away from the dollar. Notice how Iran is an essential land passage for goods between Europe and Asia. Iran is also a partner in the BRICS alliance. It would be a shame if it devolved into chaos there. Because ever since Iran has been closed off to the West, Europe and the US have relied on the IMEC trade corridor across the Arabian Peninsula and through the Suez Canal in Egypt for the transport of trillions of dollars of goods and materials and oil every year. But ultimately, it's a bottleneck and a problem if the West is going to compete with China for trade dominance. So, meet the Ben Gurion Canal Project. A canal through Israel that would turn it into one of the most significant trading hubs in the world. Ships would travel from the port of Eilat up the Jordan River and then through the canal to enter the Mediterranean at Ashkelon. Only problem is it comes out right next to northern Gaza. And there was never any way that investors are going to pour billions of dollars into building a canal if it's just going to become a shooting gallery for Hamas rocket launchers. But hey, what a coincidence. I guess that's not really going to be a problem anymore now, is it? Funny how that works, right? See, if you want to know the real reason for global events, look to the dollar. Look to the banks. Look to the oil and the big picture of global trade. These are the levers that move the world. All the trans ideology, the left-right bickering, the cries about nuclear weapons, the terrorist attacks, the defensive preemptive strikes, or whatever the hell they're called, those are all just pawns on the board. And if you want a real conspiracy to chew on, Google pawns on the board, but that's a whole different story. So as for Iran right now, in some ways, it's easy to feel powerless. It's easy to feel like we really are all just pawns on the board. But it's important to remember that you're not. You're an American citizen. Or if you're not one of those, you're someone, somewhere at least, and you do have a voice. And at least for now, it's not illegal to use it. Don't be fooled by the propaganda. Don't be fooled by the Hasbara. Don't be fooled by the fear-mongering that they use to manufacture consent for every single war. The people pushing for this war are not like you and me. They do not suffer in war. They get richer. They do not have to fight wars. They go to the Hamptons while our boys die in the desert. They do not work for you or me, no matter what your civics professor might have told you. Right now, the most powerful thing I think that we can all do is to just get loud and get educated. Because who knows what the next step will be. Maybe we'll have a legit anti-war protest on our hands here soon or something. But then again, can't help but notice how they've already got the National Guard deployed, conveniently, if that were to happen. Sure, that's just a coincidence. But anyways, I hope that helped clarify some things for you. I hope that helped you put some of the ways you're feeling into words. And I hope that you can share parts of this with people who are falling into some of the lies and propaganda and emotional manipulation that's in overdrive right now. Listen, I'm no expert, and I'm always learning. But I've learned enough by now to know that there's always another war. Not because it's just, and not because it's necessary, or because it's good for you or your country. It never is. The sad fact of the matter is that it's because for the bankers and the oligarchs and the political class, it's profitable. It's because war is a racket.
That would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. It feels so good to be back. Be sure to like the video and help me get this info out to as many people as possible by leaving a comment or sharing it with your friends and family. If you're not already, I really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel here. I really fell in love with this longer format during my time hosting Candace, so you're going to be seeing a lot more of me here on YouTube doing deeper dives like this. That's all for our show today. Be sure to drink your water, get some sleep, Tell someone you love them tomorrow, and I'll see you next time.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sick that we can't talk. Our security is at stake.